Hi, you guys. I'm back with the question and answer period. Unfortunately, I lost my bag, so I have a mug this time. So let's get started with some of these answers that you or questions that you guys submitted about the chapter. So let's start with this question from Sarah. If the Missouri Compromise prohibited slavery above 3630, why are there slave states such as Kentucky? So Sarah must have looked at the map that I provided in your lecture. So in the map, you'll see that there are slave states such as Kentucky and Virginia and Missouri that are above that parallel of 3630. What the Missouri Compromise says is that so when Missouri in 1819 petitioned to become a member state and petitioned to uh, enter the Union as a slave state, they don't want there to be more slave states than free states. So once Missouri enters as a slave state, Maine enters as a free state to restore the balance. And so in order to I would say maybe put a cap on the expansion of slavery, they say that any other state after 1820 that petitions to enter the Union, if you are above 3630, you cannot be a slave state. Okay? All right. Next question comes from Sam. What was the American Colonization Society? Were they abolitionists? So, this is also a good question. So, the American Colonization Society, you could say that they were abolitionists because they are attempting to abolish the practice of slavery. But it wasn't like, I want to abolish slavery because it's a moral wrong and that these people need freedom. On the contrary, it was slavery, they would normally call for the gradual emancipation or the gradual abolition of slavery, but black people they felt should be shipped to Africa. So you can be free, but you cannot be free here. So while they were abolitionists, I would not put them, they're not in the same camp as Frederick Douglass or John Brown. They're completely different. A lot of people that we know will support the American Colonization Society, at least in the beginning, until they have a bit more of an evolution, but we'll get to that as we go further on in the semester. Okay, next question comes from James. Did Andrew Jackson own slaves? The easy answer to this is yes. Andrew Jackson did own slaves. A number of our former presidents of this era owned slaves. George Washington owned slaves, as did Thomas Jefferson. Now, a funny story about Washington and his widow once he dies is that in his will he says that when his wife dies, that his slaves will be freed. Well, his wife will just goes ahead and she goes ahead and frees these enslaved people because not necessarily because she's like, you should have freedom. It's the fact that she had all of these people around her that had a vested interest in her death. So it's like, we're just waiting for you to die so we can have freedom. So she ends up setting them free. But yes, Andrew Jackson does own slaves. For those of you who are in my class right now, if you go to your 10th module, you'll find an ad that Andrew Jackson places in a local newspaper because one of his slaves has escaped and he's looking for them. So he places a pretty detailed ad in a newspaper looking for this enslaved person. So, yes, Andrew Jackson did own slaves. All right. I don't know why I'm shaking it because it's only like two left. So, all right. This question comes from Daniel. Did the rise of the Cotton Kingdom lead to any desire to spread slavery westward? Absolutely. Cotton was incredibly profitable, right? Once we get the cotton gin, there is a cotton explosion. Cotton typically was very tedious to harvest because it's not just about picking the cotton. Once you pick the cotton, you have to clean it. So prior to the cotton gin, which cleans all of the seeds and plant material out of the cotton, prior to the cotton gin, it would take one individual about 10 hours to produce 1 pound of usable cotton. After the cotton gin, that number just decreases by a huge amount. So it doesn't take a very long time to produce several pounds of cotton. By like 1793, the US produced maybe 5 million pounds of cotton a year. By, 30 years later, the US is producing hundreds of millions of pounds of cotton per year. So, yes, the rise of the cotton kingdom will lead to a desire to spread the institution of slavery westward because it is intensely profitable. So, yes, Daniel, it absolutely will. And the last question comes from Kimberlee, who writes, when did the donkey become the symbol of the Democratic Party? I'm glad you asked this question. So it's actually a funny story. When Jackson is running for president, one of his opponents, in frustration calls him a jackass. And Jackson liked it, and so he liked it so much. When you think of a donkey, they're stubborn. And so his opponent called him a jackass, and Jackson, he quite likes it. And so it becomes the symbol of the Democratic Party because, Jackson likes the symbol. He's like, oh, jackass. I like it. I like that. So yeah, those are all of the questions we have for this week's grab bag. I will see you guys next week. All right. Bye.